You there, boy. What day is it? Why, it's Friday, sir. It's Wandavision. Okay, so episode 3 ended with a cliffhanger that even Hawkeye didn't see coming, and we closed out with Monica being tossed out faster than the Inhumans after that terrible first series. This entry flips the script to answer a lot of questions that we have over the show, and I absolutely love it when a film or series does this. Whether it's the Two Towers opening with the perspective of Gandalf, Lost showing us the plane crash from the view of the others, or Back to the Bloody Future 2 showcasing Marty not trying to bone his mum again, it always feels like it adds a lot of context. As always, we're going to be breaking it all down, but if this is your first time here, I'm your host Paul, and I just want to give a huge thank you for getting our breakdowns trending on YouTube 2 weeks in a row. I love you 3000, now let's get into the spoilers. Okay, so Monica Rambeau is someone that I feel we need to talk about in general before we get into what happens in the episode itself. Her debut in the MCU actually happened all the way back in the 1990s when we saw her as a kid in Captain Marvel starring Brie Larson. Nick Fury clearly had his eye on her mother, and we find out in the episode that she was a founder of S.W.O.R.D, and then Monica got the job through knowing her. Probably had some qualifications too. She will of course be going on to be more in line with her comic book counterpart, which we'll now be discussing in general. As always though, time codes are below if you want to just skip ahead to the breakdown, but the next part of the video kind of fills in the who's who of the big names. Now under the name Photon, Monica is able to modulate her own energy to change her appearance so that she can look like anyone she wants. Monica can also fly, fire energy blasts, and absorb the energy of things around her. She also possesses superhuman speed, can turn invisible, and phase through solid matter. Not to jump too far ahead, but we know that she will be featuring alongside Ms. Marvel and Carol Danvers in Captain Marvel 2, so expect to see a lot more from her in the Marvel universe. Now alongside her is FBI agent Jimmy Woo, who we last saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp. The guy was fascinated by magic, and I don't need to spell it out that Wanda bewitched. What? No, but clearly in that film he was assigned to look after Scott because he broke the Sokovia Accords. Similar to this, Wanda did too, and it's even possible that he was shifted to her after Lang because of his job in general. It turns out that he was actually the voice on the other end of the radio and has been desperately trying to save not only Monica but the townsfolk as well. On top of the pair, we also discover more about the enigmatic beekeeper, and initially there were theories that he was going to turn into Swarm. Though this could be the case, for now he stands more as a demonstration of how the ins and outs of the bubble work. I absolutely love things being shown to us from S.W.O.R.D's perspective, and though this is never said in the entry, the fact that they were chosen over S.H.I.E.L.D. could hint at what's going on in the series itself. Due to the commercials, it's long been speculated that Hydra have something to do with Wanda being trapped, and that they along with Agnes and Mephisto are behind it all. This was hinted at by the Strucker watch, the Hydra soak, and Phil holding a newspaper in a way in which Hydrant looked like Hydra. The last time we saw them in the MCU was when Mitchell Carson was running off with Darren Cross's Pym particle, and we already know from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier trailer that they're making a big comeback. Like the Inhumans should, wow! As we learned in the Winter Soldier, Hydra actually infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., and thus it makes sense why S.W.O.R.D would be chosen over them. Nick Fury's journey during the post-credits scene of Far From Home was travelling through space, which is typically the type of mission that S.W.O.R.D go on, but that could be me reaching and maybe they're just on Earth. Potentially though, Hydra want to weaponize Wanda and maybe using her own powers to create a Barf-like simulation in which she's trapped. After doing a binge watch of the MCU recently, I noticed that the ending of Avengers Endgame basically had a very similar aesthetic to Wandavision, with both her and Steve travelling back to a 1950s alternate reality to be with the one that they love. Thus, they could possibly be using this notion to make her do their evil bidding, but we'll of course discuss that later in the video. Now speaking of Endgame, Paul Bettany actually revealed something earlier this week that could have sealed the fate of Vision. In IMDb's Ask Each Other Anything, he revealed that there was a post-credit scene at the end of the movie that had Wanda unzipping a body bag with Vision in it. Feige cut the scene as we now know, but that doesn't mean that it won't pop up again down the line, perhaps showing one of the heartbreaking reasons that led to the events of the season. Now as for the episode itself, we open with Monica waking up in a hospital after recovering from the blip. We later learn that her mother Maria died 2 years after the snap, and thus she spent the time after that not truly knowing what happened to her daughter, though she held out hope she would return. It's so impactful how, from Monica's perspective, she was sat next to her mother in bed as she was just about to be discharged, and then in the next second she was gone. The opening is amazing, and it truly brings the full weight that one would feel if something like this actually happened. So far, we've only really seen the good side of the blip, but the panic and confusion that happens here is astounding, and it's one of the best openings in an MCU property ever. I loved watching her realise that her mother had passed away, and that she now had to attempt to return to a normal life, though it would be impossible. We cut to the Sentient Weapon Observation Response Division, or SWORD for short, to find Monica returning to her job to find that her ID has expired. On a news report, we can see a mother and daughter hugging with the headline, "The blip brings back loved ones." This is of course a slap in the face to Monica, as both she and her mother should have been reunited like the people in the picture, but they were cheated out of their last goodbye by Thanos. If Maria had have been taken instead, or along with Monica, then they would have got some time together to finally say farewell, and it just feels completely depressing in a show that's already slightly depressing. Now here we meet acting director Tyler Hayward, who pretty much becomes the kinda authoritative figure that these Fed dramas are full of. A cool little point that comes from him is he actually plays into one of the fan theories slightly and the clues that have been given to us so far. Throughout the series, it's been theorized that everyone other than Wanda is acting, and this was cemented by Vision, who said that the whole world is a stage. Monica initially calls him director, which he corrects to acting director, perhaps being a cute little nod to what's going on in the show overall. We see a plaque for Maria, whose nickname was of course also Photon, hinting to us a direction that her daughter could be going when filling in her shoes. Maria is pretty much the Peggy Carter of her organisation, and similar to Peggy, she met a captain that inspired her to build a law enforcement agency. We learn Monica is also the first to report in, and everyone else is likely taking a break, probably to be with their family. SWORD used to be investigating space travel, but since the blip took out half the staff, they've pointed their eyes to Earth instead. There's some sort of awkwardness between the pair, as Monica should have named her mother's replacement, but because of the snap she wasn't able to, perhaps meaning that there may be some bad blood between the two down the line. Maria implemented guidelines to keep the vanished returned on Earth, and thus Monica is held back from doing things that she wants to, probably because her mother sort of wanted to look after her. From beyond the grave, creepy. Now behind Tyler, we can also see a circular map which juxtaposes the hexagonal ones that we see in Westview later, showing the differences between the realities very subtly. Hexagons have of course appeared throughout the season so far, and Wanda's powers in the comics are in fact called Hex 2. Therefore, Monica saying that Wanda is the one doing it does make a lot of sense, but we'll talk about how that might be a misdirect later in the video. Monica is sent on a missing persons mission that turns into a missing town one, and it's at this point that we get a proper view of Westview from the outside. Now we've already broken down the Westview sign for having the initials W and V, which stands for Wonder and Vision, and for having the letters TV in the middle of it. However, the slogan of the town also reads "Home, it's where you make it," which of course ties into how Wanda has made her home and the fake reality there. We can also see that Monica has a SWORD ID badge around her neck, and because of this, we can assume that certain items of clothing are transformed upon entering the reality. Just in the same way that the hazmat suit became a beekeeper outfit, Monica's badge and ID transformed into the SWORD necklace that we saw in episode 3. Here she meets Jimmy, boosting out the tricks that he learned from Ant-Man, and also two police officers who don't seem to know what's going on, claiming that they come from Eastview. Now to me this highlights that there's also force on the outside controlling their brains and what they perceive, as Wanda wouldn't be able to do this. A similar thing happened in the book It by Stephen King, as Pennywise was actually able to mentally influence the adults so that they didn't look too deeply into the missing children. It's extremely similar here, with the police being completely nonchalant about the vanishing town, almost like they've been mind controlled, which they definitely have. Now Jimmy brings up that he's looking after a missing person from the Witness Protection Program, and we don't actually learn who this is. It is said that it's a man, and it could be Ralph, who has been missing from the show itself. It may also be Norm, as he was called a communist, and though not a missing person, he did seem very suspicious. Now early on, I got a lot of X-File vibes, and if the show is aping other TV series so far, I would say that this is the closest thing that this episode pulls from. Monica sends in a drone, and as we predicted in episode 2, the helicopter was indeed one of these. It disappearing makes Monica put her hand in the membrane, and she mustn't have seen Alien because, look, stick in your face and stuff, it's the last thing you want to do. Jimmy goes for help, and we are reintroduced to wisecracking Darcy, played by Kat Dennings. Due to her experience in Thor and astrophysics, she's been brought in to help to get to the bottom of what's going on. As we know, the ending of The Dark World dealt with going through multiple realities and dimensions, and thus she has experience to pick up the correct signals. She was actually the person watching the TV at the end of episode 1, and has been scanning things for clues, bringing everything together. Now at the Sword Response base, we watch as their plan seems to be just losing drones, but Darcy hooks up to an old physioscope to tune into the frequencies of the show. This is made by Lexington Instruments, which could be a nod to Alexander Lexington, a mutant in the Marvel Universe. Slowly they piece together the identities of the townfolk, and these provide some major clues. Now Dottie is not in the lineup at all, perhaps suggesting that she isn't actually a member of the town and is one of the big bads, potentially the Grim Reaper, Mephisto or Nightmare. Going with the latter two, the villains could be using the twins as a way to manifest into physical form so that they can enter the MC reality, as until now they've existed solely in their own planes. However, this could also be a red herring, as Dottie didn't appear until the second episode, and the photos that we see are only from episode 1, perhaps leading us astray when we should be focusing on someone else. That is, Agnes. Unlike the rest, she's missing ID, and therefore I think the theory that she is Agatha Harkness gains a lot more weight. If S.W.O.R.D. were unable to track her down, it's likely because she wanted to lie low and never register with any organisations due to her immortality. Agatha has lived for centuries, and it is possible that she met with Wanda and showed her how to boost her powers in order to create this new dimension. In the first episode, she told us that her wedding anniversary with Ralph was on the 2nd of June, and this is actually the day that the first Salem witch trials took place. It is possible that as these began, she pledged her allegiance to the Dark Lord Mephisto, and there are a number of other clues. I've covered this in a lot more detail on other videos and don't want to just retread old ground, but she did say that Ralph looks better in the dark. Also, make sure that no one knows I called Herb Ralph in the last video, because that would make me look like a right idiot, wouldn't it? Now they ask the questions that we've been doing all along, which is a nice little touch that shows Marvel knew what the main talking points would be. We can also tell from the driving licenses and Monica driving in that Westview is indeed in New Jersey, which has long been theorized. It's nice to have the location finally confirmed, and it's very close to the base that we saw in Avengers Endgame. Though difficult to make out, there is a bit of text on everyone's name that basically asks if Wanda is controlling the whole town, and though this question, it does seem like it gets an answer at the end, I don't think that she fully is. There's also Mr. Hart, who we learn is called Todd Davis, which is actually the name of an extra from Iron Man 3, but beyond that I couldn't find anything else. Now another interesting element is the colorization of the drone, which perhaps shows that sometimes Wanda loses her control over the reality and is unable to hold everything in place. This of course happened with the blood on Dottie's hand, showing that when she's distracted, it is possible to beat her, though she can always reset things. In the sewers we follow the beekeeper, and his fate still remains unknown. We know that he wasn't sent outside of the bubble, and that the time he spent inside there was erased, so perhaps he's been transformed into something else. If the theories about him being Swarm are true, then this would be an amazing origin story, as the villain pretty much exists as a swarm of bees most of the time, meaning that his matter could have been highly altered by such an occurrence. Cut to Darcy and Wu sharing chips, and the latter talks about having babies himself. Not gonna lie, yeah, kinda hope these characters hook up at some point, but I guess we're gonna see. Now last week we did wonder why we never saw the clip of Monica being thrown out of the reality as it was in the trailer. However, we finally get it shown here as we switch perspectives back to Wanda, who not only erases time but also manifests her powers to send Monica flying out of the dome. Monica also has octagon earrings, which juxtaposes the idea of hexagons, hammering home that she was opposed to the pocket dimension in some way. Now as mentioned earlier, Rambeau does eventually become Photon in the comics, and I actually have a theory that when she was hit with Wanda's powers and then thrown out of the membrane, that she gained these abilities and will have them going forward. A lot of Photon's power set, including the ability to change appearance, are all things that we've seen demonstrated in this pocket dimension with the shifting of time periods. Thus it could be possible that Wanda's power and the reality have merged together into her, making her close to her comic book counterpart. On the outside she says it's Wanda, but I think that this is a misdirect to make us think that it is. A lot of the time, things have just been forced on her, such as the heavily speeded up pregnancy, and basically a lot of the major plot points. Just after throwing Monica out of the reality, we can also see some giraffe statues. Giraffes are actually born with the ability to stand up, unlike a lot of animals, and this hints to the hastiness of the cycle that the twins went through, hinting to me that someone or something is subliminally influencing her to carry things out. She also sees Vision as he was when he died, which to me paints her out as more of a victim of her own trauma, rather than the big bad that a lot of people think she is. In general, I feel that villains have to be evil, whereas Wanda really isn't. She's someone struggling with the mental health issues and despair that comes with grief, and has likely been manipulated. There is of course 5 more episodes left as well, so I can't see the big reveal that she's the baddie coming this early on, and we will likely have a lot more going forward. We close out to Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix, hinting to her power and that she may be running the show from now on for quite a while. However, whilst this plays, she also picks up one of her kids, and to me this sort of symbolises the occult theory that Mephisto is wanting to take over their body. Now as for the episode as a whole, I thought it was incredible, you know. From the opening I was absolutely hooked, and it was just such a good way to handle the severity of the consequences of not only the snap, but also bringing everyone back. I think this was easily the strongest of the episodes thus far, and seeing things through the eyes of someone on the ground level trying to adjust to missing 5 years of their life was a brilliant choice. Now that we have the added context of what's going on, I think we will have a much better appreciation for the show. I also think retroactively it will make the past episodes even better now that we have more answers. Both Darcy and Jimmy were also some inspired choices to follow, and I love the light-hearted touches of wit that they brought whilst dealing with the severity of the events. Episode 4 was amazing, and this show has me fully hooked now. I think that this is an incredible entry. Okay, so for the next part of the video, we will be talking about some of the spoilers that have been posted, so make sure you click out of the breakdown if you don't want anything ruined. This was actually posted by Disney themselves during a making of video on the series, and it does seem to hint at where things could be going. Now, in the background of this image, we can clearly see Wonder Man, and fans of the comic The Vision and Scarlet Witch will know that he plays a pivotal arc in that book. The story itself is somewhat inspiring the events of the show, as we already know that the Grim Reaper is featuring in it, and his brother is actually Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man, so things do link together quite well. Now I have heard a lot of theories that the Vision we see might actually be Wonder Man, and that the Grim Reaper has brought him back to life through his brother's body, which he is unaware of inhabiting. In the source material, Vision's mind was actually a duplicate of Wonder Man's brain, and this could be carried across here, though we won't know for definite until it's actually revealed. Now huge shoutouts to Hydra on my last video for sending me down this rabbit hole, and after investigating it further, I do think that it lines up. Wonder Man actually has a lot of the same skill set as Vision has, but he possesses super speed. Before this series, Vision never moved faster than a speeding bullet, and it did seem odd that he was suddenly able to do this when we hadn't seen it before. It would have been super useful when trying to avoid Thanos' forces, and maybe he is actually in Wonder Man's body and just doesn't realise it yet. Now whether this turns out to be true or not, I don't know, but I think it does tie in with the comics, but Marvel may be misleading us on purpose. We've all seen the fake shots that they drop in trailers, and I'll never forget the Hulk at the end of Infinity War. You won't fool me again. Now I have been long thinking that when this reality collapses that Vision will go with it too, but this could be a way of keeping him around, and it also means that Paul Bettany doesn't have to cake himself in beetroot juice every single day. There were also some leaked Young Avengers Funkos posted that seemed to show what could be the team, as well as Wiccan and Speed in their full costumes. However, I'm not sure whether these are fan made or not, but I do think they're worth talking about just in case they aren't. Now, I'd of course love to hear your thoughts on these leaks and what theories you take from them, and obviously we won't know until they're revealed in the show itself, but it's always fun to speculate and say where you think things will be going. There's also the episode itself, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on, and as a thank you for interacting with the video, you'll be entered into a prize draw on the 30th of January in which we're giving away 3 copies of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings 4K box sets to our subscribers. All you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of some of the theories on what's going on in the show, or episode 3, which will be linked on screen right now. With that out of the way, thanks for sitting through the video, I hope you enjoy the weekend, I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. You better be back, yeah? Promise me that. Take care. Peace.